Hi lovelies! Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria and today's video is going to be my mid-year freakout. So basically just me recapping on the last 6 months of my reading, some of my favourites, some of my disappointments, new favourite characters, all good things like that. And I'm not sure who created this. I know I did one at the end of last year and things like that, so I'm not sure who actually created this tag, but I got my questions from Carrie Can Read, so I'll link her video in the description box below just so that you know where I got my questions from. But yeah, I think when I'm looking back at my last 6 months of reading, I think I did have a couple of rocky months there where I was feeling a little bit slumpy. I was feeling like I just wasn't getting those reads that had me obsessed, had me wanting to pick up the book while I was working, while I was out, thinking about it while I wasn't reading it. But at the same time, I think I've got some new all-time favourite reads within that time as well. And I think what I've learned is I do need to diversify my TBR. So I am very much a fantasy reader. I love fantasy romance, but I think when you read a certain amount of any genre, it's going to feel a little bit stale. So I've definitely found that diversifying my TBR this year, even if some of the books haven't been like 5-star reads for me, has just made the experience and the enjoyment of some of my favourite genres even richer because I'm not feeling like I'm reading the same thing over and over again. And that's not to say that within the fantasy realm or the romantasy realm that there's no uniqueness anymore. It is just a case of if you read a certain genre over and over again, you're going to notice patterns, you're going to notice kind of the mechanisms that are used within those stories. It's the same with thrillers, it'll be the same with romance, and I just found myself getting in a little bit of a fantasy rut, which I never want to get into because it is my favourite genre. So really glad I decided to diversify a little bit, reading a bit more literary fiction, a bit more romance, and just breaking up some of those fantasy reads. So yeah, I think that'll definitely be reflected in some of my answers to the questions. So without further ado, let's just get into the questions. So the first question is, what's been your favourite book of the year? And I think it may just be because I read it recently, but I do think without a doubt it's The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I'm pretty sure this is going to be on so many people's lists as their favourite book of the year so far. I did have a few that I would say are up there, maybe kind of tied with this, but in terms of me trying to decide which is my absolute favourite book, I'm kind of rating this on the feeling I got while reading this, and this was the book that was giving me kind of palpitations. I was really concerned about the characters, I felt really connected to them, I was audibly laughing, I felt like I was really immersed in this story, and I think this is just kind of the perfect combination of everything I like. It's obviously fantasy romance. I would say that it's leaning heavier on the fantasy side with the romance as a subplot, which is perfection for me. That's exactly what I like. It has kind of a gothic undertone in there as well, so in terms of the scenery, it's broken cathedrals and very dark and atmospheric, and yeah, it just had everything I love. I loved the character work, I loved the world that she built here, loved the story. The twist at the end was a tiny bit predictable, but not in the way that it was boring to read, so I still really enjoyed kind of seeing how it all played out. So yeah, I'd definitely say that this year this has probably been my favourite book so far. But I did want to give a shout out to ML Wang, and particularly for her book The Sword of Kagan. Now I did also read Blood Over Brighthaven by her as well, and I wasn't sure which one to mention because again they are pretty much tied in terms of my enjoyment of them and her writing. But the reason I picked this one is because I don't think it gets as much hype as Blood Over Brighthaven. It has been traditionally published now, so I do see people talking about it, but not so many people talking about this one, and it may be just because the circles that I'm in, a lot of people prefer romantasy, whereas this is much more of a fantasy. There's no real romance in here at all. There's slight mentions of it, but that's definitely not even the focus of a subplot within this. It's much more about familial dynamics, kind of what happens if you give up on your dreams, and there is a fantasy element there, but again I do think it's more of a character driven story, so it might just be that people I follow don't really like those, but definitely think this one deserves more hype and this author deserves more hype. And then another one by an author who I do think gets a good bit of hype, but not as much as I would expect considering some of the books that I've read by her, and that's T. Kingfisher, and the book that I read recently is Paladin's Grace, and this was just such a delight to read. It's very cozy, whimsical, but definitely has a really dark undercurrent, and if you know T. Kingfisher, she is a bit of a genre bender in terms of her stories. A lot of them will have a horror undertone there, but she seems to be able to blend the two really perfectly where it doesn't feel like it's trying to blend, it's just a seamless integration of the two genres, and I really love that because I do love a whimsical story and a cozy story, but I need there to be some sort of stakes there to keep me involved, to keep me invested, and this was the perfect kind of mashup of that. So another one that I just wanted to give a special mention to because it's definitely made me really intrigued to read the rest of the series. Okay, so next up is the best sequel I've read this year, and there's two that came to mind immediately when I seen this question, and the first one is Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. This is the third book in the Legendborn cycle, so the series is kind of based on Arthurian legend and just kind of in a modern setting, and there is also a little bit of dark academia in there as well, but I would say it leans more on the fantasy side of things. But if you do like that, you know, secret societies, then you probably will like this series as well. But I've been waiting for quite a long time for this third book. I think the second book came out maybe 3 years ago or something like that. I did binge Legendborn and Bloodmarked when they came out, and the way that the second book ended just had me chomping at the bit to see what was going to happen. But for whatever reason, the book was delayed a little bit, so I was really highly anticipating this when it came out and definitely didn't disappoint. I do think that this pacing kind of slowed down in this third book, but I think it was definitely needed so that we could get that depth of the characters and to kind of understand maybe where the series is going to go. And there was quite a lot of expansion within the second book, and this one just slowed it down so that we can really immerse ourselves within that. So for me personally, again, I'm quite character driven, so I really loved it. Give 5 stars, and yet again, Tracy Dion has left us on a killer cliffhanger and unsure when the next book is out. Hopefully it's not too long, hopefully it's not 3 years. If it is, I'll be ready to read it when it's out. And then the next one I wanted to mention is The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. So I did read Swordcatcher earlier in this year as well, and ended up wanting to read this one straight away. Really loved the first book in this series. It was a little bit slower because we were getting quite a lot of information about this new world that she was trying to build, so we did get a lot of world building, a little bit of info dumping in the first book, but I did enjoy it. But I know that a lot of people kind of felt that info dump when they read the first book. But by the time we get to the second book, obviously we've got all of that out of the way, and I felt this was much faster paced. There was a good bit of expansion in terms of the world that we learnt about in the first book. We got a lot more expansion into the characters and their motivations and interactions with them. I ended up enjoying this one a lot more than the first book. I do think the first book was still really good. I think I rated it at like 4.5, which is a really good rating, and I think I rated this the same. But if I look at them objectively, I would say that I enjoyed this one more, just because I do think we didn't have to spend as much time with the world building, so we were able to just stay with the characters with this one and expand on that mystery plot that we got in the first book. So yeah, really love this sequel. So the next question is a release you haven't read yet but you want to, and I would definitely say that that's Sunrise on the Reaping. I'm getting severe FOMO for not having read that yet, but it's been quite some time since I read The Hunger Games, you know, probably about 10 years or something like that, and I do want to try and reread those, read Songbirds and Snakes, and then jump into Sunrise on the Reaping. So really need to get my act together and do that reread of The Hunger Games so that I can do that, because I definitely think it's a book I'm going to love. I adored The Hunger Games when I first read it. I was a little bit older when I read it because it came out when I was a little bit older. I still really enjoyed it, still really loved the world. Was definitely one of those people that was like, the books were better than the movies, but still really loved the movies. I think the adaptations were really good. Yeah, really need to do that reread so that I can pick that one up. Okay, so the next question is, what's my most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And I've got so many, but the first few on my list are firstly Catabasis or Catabasis, not sure how to pronounce it, by R.F. Kuang. Loved everything I've read by her, so really intrigued by this, just in terms of the synopsis and the concept. And I've seen quite a few people who have read the arcs of it. I would absolutely die for an arc of it, but it's out next month anyway, so I don't have too long to wait for that one, but really highly anticipating that one. Then we have A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, and this is the same author as The Society for Very Irregular Witches. Something, I say it wrong every time. I really loved that first book. It was really cozy, really whimsical, very much kind of a romance set in a fantasy world, and was a perfect kind of September-October read, so really highly anticipating reading that one when it comes out. Then we've got The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and I think this is going to be quite witchy but also kind of have a horror aspect to it. I've read a few books by this author before, and I've always really enjoyed her writing, and the concepts have always been quite unique for me as well, so I'll be really intrigued to see what she does with this one. We then have what I believe is going to be finally the final book in kind of the From Blood and Ash series, Primal of Blood and Bone by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I've read that series over the past couple of years and been waiting for this final book to come out. Kind of tempted once the last book comes out to maybe read it and then do a full reread of that series, because I really love some of the first books are some of my favourite books, and I would maybe love to revisit that series and just read it again, just casually, just to kind of re-immerse myself in that world, because it was one of the first fantasy/romantasy series that I read when I got back into reading, so definitely a series I need to put in my reread list. And then lastly, for the list that I've pulled, even though there's so many releases, I think I'm going to do a separate video for all the releases, kind of going through the synopsis and everything like that, because there's literally probably about 15 to 20 books that I'm really highly anticipating. But the last one I've got on my list for this video is Arcana Academy by Elise Kova. Now, I've never read anything by this author, but there's quite a few of her books that always kind of catch my eye when I'm in the bookstore, but I have heard some mixed things about her writing. But this one I believe is going to be a dark academia romantasy vibe, and say no more, sign me up. I do have an arc for this one as well, so probably going to be starting this one soon, but it's definitely one that caught my eye as soon as I seen the synopsis for it and the cover. I'm not sure if this is her first straight to traditionally published book or if she's had trad published before, but yeah, either way, I was just really intrigued by the cover and by the synopsis of this one, so definitely highly anticipating it and hopefully be reading it soon. Okay, so next question is one I always hate talking about because I never want to bad talk books, but it's my biggest disappointments for this year. So the first one I wanted to mention is The Atlas Complex by Olivia Blake. Now, if you've been here for any amount of time, you know that Olivia Blake is one of my favourite authors. and I actually loved the first two books in the Atlas 6 series, so was obviously very highly anticipating this one, and perhaps my expectations were too high. But my main disappointment with this one was I felt like we were rehashing ground that we'd already covered in the first two books. The second book ends in quite an explosive way, so I think I was just expecting a bit more action or a bit more tension to be present within the last book, and while there was tension between the characters, there wasn't really anything overarching, gave them any stakes or any purpose or direction for the story to go. So didn't hate it. I definitely still enjoyed her writing. I really enjoyed kind of the deeper dive into the characters, because after two books I have fallen in love with them and I just wanted to know what happens with their story. But in terms of objectively looking at the book, I was pretty disappointed with how it ended. It just felt very anticlimactic, and yeah, just wasn't what I was expecting. Next up would be Book of Night by Holly Black, and I really love the Cruel Prince series by this author. Really love how lush and kind of immersive it was, and one of the main things I loved about it was the character work. You know, I feel like we got a really deep dive into those characters. Even from the first book, you get a really good understanding of them, and they're interesting and intriguing and you want to know more about them. But I felt like with this one, most of it just fell kind of flat. You know, I wasn't really that invested in the characters. I wasn't really that invested in the narrative. I think there was a lot more telling versus showing, and it just meant that I felt disconnected from the story the entire way through, and it really is such a shame because I really thought I was going to enjoy it. I know it's got quite mixed reviews, but from the few people that I've seen who have read it within kind of my mutuals, I have quite a similar taste to them, so I thought this was just going to be a bit of an outlier that I end up enjoying that a lot of people don't. But unfortunately, I am in the crowd that didn't love it as much. Again, I did enjoy the writing. I think the writing was quite pretty at times, but in terms of keeping my attention and piquing my interest to continue the series, didn't quite get me there. I probably will still read the second book because it is a duology, but it would have previously been on one of my highly anticipated releases, whereas now it's kind of been knocked off that list because yes, I probably will read it, but I'm not going to be in a rush to. Next up is another favourite author of mine, so Naomi Novik. I read her book Uprooted this year, and I was really excited about this one because it was basically Naomi Novik, who I absolutely love her writing and so many of her books, mixed with a Beauty and the Beast kind of retelling, and I think that was the shortfall. This being dubbed as a Beauty and the Beast retelling definitely sets you up to think you're getting something much different than what you get with this book. It's much slower paced than I expected. It's a lot less tension between the characters who are kind of the Beast and the Beauty. There was a lot of kind of folkloric immersion within the narrative, and while I did enjoy that, I do think that it was sometimes overused and misplaced within the narrative. And yeah, I think just similarly with some of the other ones, I just didn't feel as connected to the characters as I would have liked to. And generally, if I don't have that, it's not going to be kind of a winner for me, but mainly just disappointed because I really love her writing, and even though I could kind of identify some beautiful quotes within the book, I just didn't feel the atmosphere that I think I was probably supposed to feel within that book, so pretty disappointed, but still glad I read it because it was on my TBR for such a long time. And then lastly, Jade City, which I'm not sure if I'm going to maybe revisit because I think I was in a bit of a slump when I read that book, and it's quite slow paced, it's very character driven, there's not a lot of plot around it, and I just feel like maybe I would have enjoyed it if I read it at another time when I was more in the mood for it. I don't think I necessarily need to reread it, but I think I will still continue the series. I was a little bit undecided if I would, but for this one I do think, as I say, it was just the case of I wasn't connecting with the characters the way I would have liked to. It felt a little bit more predictable than I would have liked, and as it's such a character driven story, it just meant that I wasn't connecting with the book the way I would have imagined, and I'm really disappointed about that because so many people say this trilogy is one of their, you know, god tier trilogies. From what I'd heard about it, I thought it would have been one of mine, but the first book hasn't got me convinced. We'll see. I probably will read the second book to see if I want to get back into this series. It could have just been a case of timing, but the first book has definitely made me a little bit more hesitant to pick up the rest of the series because I didn't love the first one the way I thought I would. Then next up is my biggest surprise, and to be honest, even when I see reviews about this book and kind of some feedback from people who didn't enjoy it as much, I kind of would agree with everything that they say, but at the same time, I just really loved it when I read it, and that's Quicksilver by Callie Hart. And for me, I just think I went into this with not the highest expectations because I had seen some feedback on it in terms of the depth of the story, you know, plot holes and things like that. So I wasn't too sure what to expect with this, and I didn't actually think it was going to be a favourite for me, but first thing I would say is I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. It's a duet narration and the narrator's done a phenomenal job with it. They really, really did. I felt immersed from kind of the first page, and I definitely think that helped with my reading experience on this this one. But also I do have to say that yes, this probably isn't the most original, it probably isn't the most convoluted, but for what it is supposed to be, you know, this is a romantasy novel. It hit all of the points perfectly. It had me laughing, it had me kicking my feet, it had me swooning. I really loved the characters, I loved getting their development. I feel like they were pretty well developed. I feel like the side characters were very well developed. There was a certain character in here that was a side character that was kind of star of the show for me. Really loved all of his scenes, and in terms of the writing, I think it was pretty well written. You know, there was nothing I would objectively say is badly written about this, and I ended up giving it 5 stars because my experience in reading it was really fun. I binged my way through it. I was thinking about it when I wasn't reading it, so I couldn't really critique it at all. So yeah, a bit confused sometimes about some of the critiques that this does get, but reading is subjective. Everyone will have different opinions and different views, but for me, I just think this is a really solid romantasy, and I'm really excited to read the second book. Next question is my favourite new author, and as I was saying at the start of the video, I have tried to diversify a little bit, and one new author that I decided to pick up that I wasn't too sure was going to be for me was Frederick Backman, and Bear Time was the first book I read by him. And Frederick Backman just has this talent of kind of observing humanity and being able to put that on a page and make it so relatable, so understandable. No matter where you're from in the world, I think you will relate to these characters. You know, most of his books are based in Sweden, I believe, so you may think that colloquially you will relate to it more if you're from there, which I'm sure there are little tidbits in here that Swedish people are picking up that we're not. And of course these are all translated, I believe. So within the original source material from Frederick Backman, there may be a few nuances in there that they are picking up. But for me, I just think he's a master of kind of observation of all different types of humans, how we react to things, how we interact with each other, experiences we have in life that shape our lives. And he just puts that on a page so masterfully. It makes me feel like I really know these characters, and because of that, I'm fully invested in their stories. And it's amazing how he does it, because some of the books do have quite a large cast of characters as well. So technically you're spending quite a short amount of time with them, but for some reason I'm just emotionally invested in each and every one of his characters. And I truly feel like I get a full 360 degrees understanding of them as a person. So I'm not sure what that talent would be called, but just his character work is some of the best I've ever read. And as it is literary fiction or kind of contemporary fiction, that's usually not my favourite genre, but after reading a lot of this year, I do think it's one that I need to explore a lot more. I'm finding more and more books that end up being favourites for me, so I do need to change my perspective on that. But yeah, I would say if you're a very character-driven reader, Frederick Backman is definitely going to be for you. I would say to look up a lot of trigger warnings for some of his books. When you read the synopsis, you probably won't really get a feel of some of the heavy topics that are discussed in here, but for most of the books that I've read by him, I would say there's pretty heavy topics in there that could be quite triggering for a lot of people, so definitely check those out if you're going to read from him, but I honestly cannot recommend him enough. The next 2 questions I'm going to group together because I'm talking about the same book, but it's new fictional crush and then new favourite character. And I've got to be honest, I don't know if it's just that I'm getting old, but for whatever reason, the books that I've read this year, I haven't really had that lasting kind of impression from any of the male lead characters within the books I've read. Enjoyed them while I've been in the books, but not really the same as some of my kind of all-time favourite characters that I categorise as my book boyfriends. But I will say that Rory from Night in the Moth was quite an interesting MMC, and I definitely felt that tension and kind of the banter, the witty banter between him and Sybil within this, so I'll put him down as my new fictional crush. But in terms of my new favourite character, you've probably heard a million people talking about this character within this book now, but the gargoyle from this book is honestly one of the funniest, heartwarming, sincere characters that I've read about in such a long time. Absolutely loved that characterisation in here. I was kind of envisioning the gargoyles from The Hunchback of Notre Dame while I was reading this, and specifically for the gargoyle in here, the tall one, I can't remember his name, but the tall one from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, that was kind of my vision for who this gargoyle was, and he honestly just had me laughing the whole way through this book. His characterization is kind of, he just calls everyone Bartholomew for whatever reason, and it sounds quite mundane, but it is just really funny the way it's slipped into the narrative. And he would say a lot of kind of modern sayings, but just say them in the wrong way. He'd be very glib in terms of telling certain characters to just kiss already and making them feel quite awkward, and he was just the perfect comic relief in what would be quite a dark book without him as a character. So really loved him, and has definitely left a lasting impression on me. Okay, so next up is books that made you cry, and I think I've mentioned a few times on this channel that for whatever reason, maybe I have a heart of stone, but when it comes to books, I don't generally cry. I can feel a feeling of sadness, you know, sometimes I got a lump in my throat, but I think I'm just able to kind of distinguish between this is words on a page and it's not real. I've kind of always been the same with movies, unless there's really sad music or it's to do with animals and children, old people as well actually. Generally, I'm able to kind of disassociate from it and it doesn't really make me that sad. It's changed a little bit as I've got older. I do find myself getting more emotional as I get older, but for the most part, I've never been a huge crier at media and things things like that. So it takes a lot for a book to make me tear up or get that lump in my throat. But one of the books that I have read recently that definitely did was Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I think part of it was that I did listen to this on audiobook while I was reading it. And the narrator on here is Julia Whelan. She's one of my favourite narrators. I always love seeing her name if she's narrating a book that I'm going to read. Instantly I'll listen to the audiobook because she's a really good narrator. But this one made me cry from just certain scenes around some of the themes that are within here. I obviously can't say because it's spoilers, but at the end of this I almost did shed a tear. It was a really, really emotional kind of ending, so this was definitely up there on that gave me a lump in my throat list of books. And then the next one I would say definitely give me that lump in my throat, but also kind of made me have some happy tears as well, is My Friends by Frederick Backman. I read the arc of this earlier this month, and honestly, even though it's a lot slower paced and much more character driven than the rest of his books, it's probably one of my favourites that I've read by him, and there were so many moments within that book that gave me that lump in my throat. And I think it's because he writes so close to home in terms of characterization and humanity, and you definitely feel like you know people within your life who are these characters, and he gets you so emotionally invested in them that when bad things are happening to them, you feel it, you know, you really, really feel it. And also just within it, there was a lot of kind of nostalgia. I could really relate to a lot of the stuff that he was talking about in there, so yeah, it was definitely very close to bringing a tear to my eye. So next up is a book that made you happy, and I'm going to say Paladin's Grace, because every time someone asks me about this one, the word that comes to mind in terms of my experience with this is just delightful. I just thought it was really fun. It had me giggling and kicking my feet. Because it has that cozy aspect of it as well, there was just a lot of silly, goofy times going on in it. And a lot of the banter was quite kind of glib, and yeah, I don't know what it is that she put in this one, but it just had me laughing the whole way through, and audibly laughing at that as well. So if you're looking for something within the romantasy genre that kind of breaks the mold of the standard setup, or it's just a little bit different than the romantasy you've been reading, definitely check this series out, because as I say, I've only read the first book. I do need to read the second book, but this definitely has that perfect mix of whimsy and cozy with a dark undertone and a bit of mystery in there, so definitely enough plot to keep you occupied, and as I say, just had me giggling the whole way through. Next up is the most beautiful book I've got this year, and she is the star of the show in this video, but it would definitely be The Night in the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is the Fairyloot edition. I think they done an amazing job with it. To show you some of the end papers as well, so they done an amazing job with the character art, or at least the artist done an amazing job with the character art. Then we've got our main male character on the back, and for me personally, I'm a big fan of purple. Purple is my favourite colour, so anytime they use that colourway, which they do quite often, they do love a purple cover, I do end up loving it, so I'd say this is one of the most beautiful. But another book which is a very different vibe than this one is This Monster of Mine by Shalini Abhishekara. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I really love what Fairyloot done with the cover on this one, and it had me instantly intrigued into what this was going to be about. Love the character art, and I definitely think this gives very much Shadow and Bone vibes, if you can see that properly. You'll probably know why if you've read those books. But the main thing I love about this one is the naked hardback. I really love the character art on here. It just looks really like mysterious and dark, and it's definitely given me a vibe of what the book is going to be about. So yeah, that would probably be second on my list of most beautiful books. Okay, so the next question is the books I need to read before the end of the year. And for this question, I'm going to look through my 25 for 2025 to see ones that I want to prioritise. I have made a good dent in that list. I think I probably have got about halfway through, but there's still quite a few on there that I haven't picked up. So going through the list, the first one I can see is Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, The Tenant of Windfell Hall by Anne Bronte, Middle Game by Shannon Maguire, Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick that one up, but it's on my list. Then I have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, The Jasad Air by Sarah Hashem. That's on my July TBR, so I will be picking that one up. Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. Again, that's on my July TBR. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. Currently reading that one. Defy the Night by Bridget Kammerer. And then Peaches and Honey by R. Rada. I did have on my list, but I think it may be getting traditionally published now, so I don't have access to it. But if it gets published before the end of the year, I'll be picking that one up as well. So still quite a few to get through there, but I think I'm about halfway through my list, which is perfect because we're halfway through the year. So I do think that I have done quite well in prioritising those reads. But one thing that's obviously been making it pretty difficult to stick to any list is all the new releases we're getting this year. We've been really, really spoiled. So definitely have to try and plan those in around some of those new releases, because the second half of this year is just as, if not more crazy for new releases. So definitely need to try and plan when I can get those in. So that's it. That's everything for this video. I will be putting the questions in the description box below, so feel free to answer any of those questions in the comments and let me know if you've read any of these books, if you agree with any of my answers. If you disagree, definitely let me know again in the comments below. And if you don't have anything to comment, just put a little book emoji in the comments. Let me know you've made it to the end. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like. If you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week and it's videos like this, so wrap-up videos, TBR jars, book shopping, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!